The bone!
The bone!
I think there's a sense of making peace with your past so that you can have a future.
Yay! We're back.
We're back with the film Away We Go.
So just a heads up for everybody listening to this episode, a little content warning. We are going to be talking about pregnancy loss on this episode, and we just wanted to give you notice on that. Elon, why did we pick this movie?
That's a good question.
Besides me telling you over and over again that you needed to see it.
So that is true. And so having just rewatched Away We Go, I realize now that I would not have been prepared in the same. It would have hit differently if I were not a parent. So I do think that was a big reason you were pushing me to see it, was having become a parent. Things hit differently, movies included. But you tell also in your own words, though, why did you need me to see this movie?
In our recent episode, this was one of my top movies, and I will, I'm sure, get into an opportunity to talk about the many reasons why in this episode. But knowing you and knowing this project and knowing you as a new parent, I felt this would resonate with you. And I also think it's a powerhouse of writing, and I thought that you would get a kick out of that as well.
And you were right.
Yes. So should I synopsisize for us first?
Please do.
Okay, so Away We Go, a film from 2009, directed by Sam Mendes.
I think it's Mendes, but I actually
Mendes, sorry. So the synopsis is a couple who is expecting this is from IMDb, sorry. A couple who is expecting their first child travel across the U.S. in order to find a perfect place to start their family. Along the way, they have misadventures and find fresh connections with an assortment of relatives and old friends who just might help them discover, in quotes, home on their own terms for the first time.
And we'll get into our characters, but the main stars listed are John Krasinski, Maya Rudolph, Allison Janney.
I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, but mainly starring John Krasinski and Maya Rudolph, and we will get into the full list later on. Wait, I want to pick a bone with a synopsis, which is the word misadventures.
Yeah.
Feels so. I actually never thought about what does a misadventure mean, because any adventure is going to have obstacles. That's literally built into the definition.
Yes.
And it feels like a very what's the word? Almost like contrived word to put in here.
That's a really good point. I think there are specific things that I would think were misadventure components of their adventure that I'll get into later when we talk about various components of the film. But that's a good point. Like, isn't that the nature of an adventure? I mean, some of them were awkward adventure moments, really bad, awkward.
That is true.
So maybe that's what they mean. So before we watch, of note for this film specifically, for this podcast, this was the first movie that we actually got to watch together in the same room. Which is significant because we're both parents, we both work full-time, and there's a freaking pandemic. And we did it.
We did it. And I think I was trying to figure out with you, and we probably don't have the answer, but when was the last time we watched a movie together? And it might have been, no, I don't even know.
I think I could argue that that was your wife. I was thinking that you were there, but we had a movie night when you were out of town, and she came over and had pizza and movie with us.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
It wasn't you. Alon, I don't know. Oh my God.
For a second, I thought it was the Mitchells versus the Machines, because I actually watched that on my own, but I could feel your presence.
Yet another movie for us to talk about. It's too bad there aren't enough of these. So before the last episode that we did, you had mentioned in prep for that episode that you watched the preview for this. So the trailer. So let's talk about what your feelings were about the trailer. and how they held up to the film. Or
I
not.
Think, no, yeah. So the trailer, if you're not paying attention, or maybe if you're me, I don't know, but if you could mistake this film for being a comedy because there is so much humor infused or as part of it. And I think this is the kind of, and it's I don't know, I guess it would be categorized as a drama in truth, but I think that's one of the problems with genres in general is that they sort of limit films.
Yeah.
And I think this is the kind of movie that I wish there were more of, because it's more real to true to life, of life having that balance of very real things balanced with just the humor of it all. And we've talked about this extensively in our other episodes, probably our first episode the most, just like grief and humor at the same time. And so I think going back to the trailer, they do, if you're paying attention, you realize it's not a comedy. There is like a nice pacing to it of like, oh, there's a story here. They're looking for home. Like you can get that from the trailer too. But I will say, at the same time, there was a little bit of too much focus, I think, on like one of the scene, the scene where they meet with now I'm blanking on their names. That family who are just like so cringy.
Oh, Ellen and
Lowell.
This is oh. We're thinking of two. They're two cringy families.
Oh yeah.
So you're thinking of Lowell and Allison Janney's character.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the pretentious couple later, the family, the Seahorse family.
Yeah, both of those. Like I feel like they did choose like very grabby
scenes
to put in the trailer, but those were sort of like beside the point. But overall, I thought it was like, oh. And I think the soundtrack also shines through in the trailer, which we're going to talk about a lot, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
What were your impressions?
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing the preview. I think I saw it in front of a different film in the theater like eons ago, and remember really being taken aback by the music already, because it's a very soft, inviting soundtrack. And we'll get into that later. But they used the music from the film in the preview, which now that I'm saying that out loud, I don't know how common that is. if trailers do that typically, or if that's something that stands out for certain films, like certainly Star Wars. I'm thinking of other films where it's like, it's like everyone knows the music, like they know the movies. But I'm realizing this is a very quiet film in a lot of ways. I thought like a very heart-holding, film. And they use the music from the film in the soundtrack, in the trailer, and it was like so provocative in this sweet, soft way. And then you're pulled into this world, and you're right. I think they kind of do latch on to the more, in quotes, comedic components of the cringy. And it was enough to pull me in. And I'm so glad that it was enough of a promise to pull me into this world that was just so fulfilling as a film on so many levels. So I think it did its job, but I also think it left out some big things that I actually don't know if it would have been able to capture appropriately in the trailer.
Yeah, I think it's like I like to complain about trailers being like sort of off, and yet at the same time, like you said, it does. If it does its job to get me to watch the movie, the person making the trailer doesn't give two shits about, if they're like, I'm just gonna sell this to you,
right. Well, and also like the players, like there's a scene in the trailer where you see it's the airport scene where Verona, played by Maya Rudolph, and Bert, played by John Krasinski, are on that the mobile walkway. And he's like, wait, what are we doing? And then she's like, didn't you see the itinerary? Like I stapled it. And I was like, okay, this is adorable. Like I already really liked the characters in the trailer too. So that was really fun for me too.
Yeah, that's agreed. And I think that's another piece of this film is the just enough quirkiness for it to feel both original and relatable.
Yeah, like relatable intimacy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's go to some themes.
Let's do it.
Well, to kick it off, I think there's just start off with the obvious one and get it out of the way. There's the theme of home, and I guess the searching for home. I think then everything, but then there's everything that can go into that, like belonging, family, identity, things like that. I don't want to say too. I have a little bit of a list here, but
So
what were some of the themes you?
Yeah. So I don't think they'll be that different for the most part. Home, adulting, parenting, family, legacy, and loss were the ones that I came up with.
Yeah. It's funny. I wrote down the word adulting, but I think I put like a sort of an asterisk next to it because I think adulting is used as like I'm not sure the right word, but it's adulting these days. It's like, oh, I have to like make my food. It's like adulting, and it's like the deeper version of adulting where you're like, oh, I'm literally learning how to be like a functioning parent.
Yeah, I think it encompasses both of those. I think that adulting is everything from hold on, I have to put my laundry away every week, to hold on, I have to do the emotional work to get to where I want to be.
You know? Yes, exactly. Or the like at one point there's this question of Verona asking Bert, like, are we fuck ups?
Right.
You know, in this very like authentic and pained kind of way, like, you know, we just totally just made all the wrong decisions, and it's like, oh, that's part of adulting too. Like, am I doing this the right way?
Right. And that is this. I want to jump into that. Can we jump into that a little? So that is what one of the things about this movie that just makes my heart soar is because there's this whole idea of what is it supposed to look like if you're doing it in quotes right. And they have this sort of little odyssey, right? Like they're going and they're seeing all of these examples of family in various stages of either function or dysfunction or falling apart after Bert's parents have made it clear that they are not going to be available to them when they thought they would be. And, you know, that scene, that heartbreaking scene where she's like, are we fuck ups? And also if you appreciate the lighting, right? Like their power just went out and they're sitting in the dark and he's trying to get like lighting on. And she's kind of having this revelation of like, maybe we need to figure out what we actually want to do and how we want to do this as the lights coming on in the space. Like, you know, that wasn't a coincidence. Like, it's like literally an aha moment of life. And like, there's no one way. And I think you see that through the course of the film, that there isn't any way that's the right way. Certainly there are ways that are more disruptive or disconcerting than others, but there isn't one way to do it. And I think I like to think that was a part of their learning, you know, in this odyssey that they went on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if it's not obvious to other viewers of the movie, like, you know, all these different families they see are sort of, they reflect parts of them and also reflect things that they aren't at the same time. Like,
yeah,
that they actually do meet some people who really are fuck ups, so to speak, which I think is, to put it maybe unkindly, but like, yeah, there's plenty of stuff that I'm like, oh no, that is just wrong. Yeah. So them sort of figuring it out through other people.
Yeah. And sort of thinking about, you know, kind of blending the themes here of sort of like family and also legacy. And, you know, one of the strong themes in the movie, I just got shivers just thinking about it, is that Verona will not get married. And there are components of the movie, like where other characters are reflecting on that and their opinions on it or their thoughts on it. And Bert understands it. Like, he understands why she won't. And I wanted to talk about that with you because I wanted to get your sense of what the significance of marriage was for the different people talking about it. And also, ultimately, we find out why, kind of a component of why Bert wants it, right? Because he's afraid, he doesn't want her to leave, right? To have that be a component of something that happens. But I wanted to get your sense on, like, what makes a family? I mean, they really talk about that, but sort of thinking about what they're all bringing to the table. Was marriage something that actually this family would have needed?
Was marriage something that Bert and Verona would need?
Yeah.
Mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think essentially let's see, before getting to that answer, maybe establishing that well, you asked a couple of questions. So one, you asked, what do we think about the other people's in the film sort of interpretation of what marriage is?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you ask, I need to look at the
Lily
list.
and Lowell.
If you ask Lily and Lowell, it's just like a thing you do because you're supposed to do it. Right. And then they seem like a very like, you suffer through shit and then life's shitty and then you die basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you ask Tom and Munch, there's a whole speech about maple syrup.
Yeah.
Which I think is, we maybe need to like delve into that as a separate thing, but they have very different answers to what it is.
Yeah.
And basically Bert and Verona are going through looking for this answer, and I think are given the answer when they have this amazing scene, which I would say is sort of twists us towards the ending of the film. Mm-hmm. But they're on the trampoline and Bert's freaking out because his sister-in-law has mm-hmm. has essentially like decided to leave her daughter and Bert's brother. Mm-hmm. And it brings into stark light Bert's fear of Verona leaving.
Yes.
Where that fear came from maybe is not so surprising, given that his parents move to Antwerp, and maybe they have some amount of being absentee parents.
Yeah.
And instead of, he says, "Will you at least marry me?" I believe is the line. Mm-hmm. And she says, "Never." And you think she's saying, "I'll never marry you," which she is, I guess. But she's also then says, "Never, I'm never going to leave you. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to leave this baby." Mm-hmm. And then they have what I've called the trampoline wedding.
Oh my God. I just got shivers.
Well, it's an amazing scene.
It's an amazing scene.
Yeah, and they go and they basically do their version of vows. You know, will you promise never to leave us? And they go through various things that they're asking each other for, and they say, "I do." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think we're given the answer that they don't need that. It's weird because it's like they don't need to be married, but also they are doing some version of it. Mm-hmm. Like a symbolic version.
Oh, good answer.
So that's my very long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, no. It's not a small question, and like, I mean, there's also the component of legacy. Verona lost her parents. They died when she was in her early 20s, I think is the timeline we're given.
Yeah.
So it's been at least 10 years. And now she's becoming a parent, and she's clearly struggling with that. And it's clearly coming in a space between those two worlds. And her sister, they see at some point, Grace, is trying to kind of talk about their parents, and Verona's really having a hard time with it. So there's also that legacy of what we bring from our past generations forward, and not having her parents there to help her reflect on that is a loss in a legacy, in a continuation of family. And then you have Bert's parents who are present, but then not, it's sort of like, how do these, and it's really, the last thing I wrote, my last note for this movie after everything else was, home is what you make it. And it's like, they're literally collecting what they need from where they've come from to make what they need for their baby.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting, these title cards they put between every location they go to. Mm-hmm. It's like Montreal and like Miami, but the last one doesn't. You actually don't know where they are.
You don't know where it is.
It just says home.
Yeah.
And granted, you know that it's her parents' house,
right?
But it's just home, and
right.
I think that speaks to what you were saying about like it's where you make it.
Yeah.
And so it's not about the place, and I guess in some ways maybe it is about the people, but it's not. Because they're alone.
Right. Well, one thing I always wondered about that section of like that part was if they're close to his brother, because it kind of looked Florida-y.
Right.
And that house. Miami. Yeah, and he's in Miami. And I was just like, I just wonder if that ended up being a component where they're close enough to him, because his life has just altered significantly. His wife has left, and he's trying to wrap his head around that while also parenting his child. And And I always want, that was like, it was like a little blip in my head of like, I think that's what happened.
Like filling in the blank, just like.
Yeah, I'm filling in a soft blank for myself there.
Right.
Yeah. This is, I have a comment that I was looking up right before I want to comment on something that I was looking up that kind of ties into themes, if I may. And then it could potentially also be a switch over into movie components, but it was really, so Alon, you were talking about before, like how I said, that I wanted you to see this because you are parenting. I reflected with you after we watched it that this was my first time, or the first time in years that I have watched it since becoming a parent. My kids are 8.5 and 6, so it's been some time. And it packed a punch for me before I was a parent, and then it hit me even harder, the entire thing, even harder. But one thing that stood out this time were their names, because I wasn't tracking before. Verona's sister's name is Grace, and I was like, that can't be random, because Grace is a very powerful idea, right? Like the idea of grace. And so I looked up the name Verona, and it means truth. So they're truth and grace. And then Bert means bright, which is so perfect for him. And I just wanted to share that as we move forward into the rest of this conversation.
I love that. I feel like I was thinking about somewhere in my notes, I wrote like, oh, John Krasinski plays like the human equivalent of a sheepdog. Like in the best kind of way, but just that he's such an optimist. And not in like he's still very real. He gets very real in one of the scenes with Maggie Gyllenhaal's character.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, sorry, going back to the names, I love that. And I didn't, I guess you have to give credit, like Dave Eggers is not going to have any accidents in his writing. So, and I'll be honest, I don't know Vendela Vida, the other writer.
I don't either. I need to go get more info.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I guess so also going to this sort of like it packing a punch as a parent, one of the things that hit me was like the questions that they're asking that I think come up around legacy. On the same scene where they're on the trampoline before this trampoline kind of wedding, is like he's talking about, well, what if it's sort of half humorous, half really painful to think about, but he's like, what if I am walking by a construction site and I am injured and like my whole personality changes, and it's like okay, it's a very specific fear, but I do think it's very relatable when you're a parent. You start thinking like, you continue on that path of like, I am responsible for someone else. It's not just, like someone is deeply dependent on me. And what if something happens to me, or my spouse. And I think the question of mortality also comes up for people as they're becoming parents as well. And these are all things that they successfully put in the mix that I was like, oh, got punch in the gut.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then the other side of that, like if you're talking about sort of the parental role, and I mean, this is not my quote, I've heard this countless times, but like, right, you will never be the most important person in your life again. Like you'll have these little people that you're taking care of, and your heart, parts of your heart are literally outside of you, and you're taking care of them. And it's very humbling. But then the other side of that, in Munch's character, we also see somebody who cannot have that. And she has adopted children who she clearly adores and loves, and also is unable to carry a pregnancy. And watching that space between her and Verona, and also her mourning, and thinking about how much love that family already has, and also how much sadness they're having, it was just another punch on the punch. I was just like,
yeah,
there's so much here. There are so many layers here to what makes us complex, beautiful, sad, happy creatures in the world.
Yeah. I think so I think we need to talk about the Montreal section of this movie. And then go back into what you're saying. So like they're greeted by, they come off like an experience where they're like, what the hell was that?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, let's go to Montreal, you know, and they're greeted by this amazing family.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I was struck by both times watching it was the subtext when Munch asks Verona how it's going.
Yep.
And you kind of notice this like weird awkwardness. And then you find out maybe, I don't know, let's say 10 minutes later that she's had pregnancy loss, or 5
multiple pregnancy losses. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that the PC term, like the more kind term, pregnancy loss?
As I understand it, yes. I could be wrong. I think some people still are very comfortable, and the term miscarriage is still used, but there can be components of a pregnancy loss that are not just that the pregnancy is miscarried, but that it has to be medically intervened with as well. And so I think my understanding is that pregnancy, like a loss of pregnancy or pregnancy loss, kind of encompasses all of that in a softer way.
Yeah. And I guess I've also heard saying miscarriage has a tinge of like blaming the mother,
the carrier, right?
The carrier. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That we're now steering away from.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And that's something, I mean, it's an area of humanity that is still so stigmatized and not talked about. And I feel like one of the things that Munch presented really well was somebody who's carrying a lot of that grief by herself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Tom is carrying it too, but one of the things about the scene, that whole arc of that family, is when they're at the strip club, right? And she's kind of disappeared, and Tom sees her on the stage, and he's starting to process his grief. Like, he doesn't know what to do. He can't do anything. And just watching Bert hold space for him and also realize he can't do anything either, that is the crux of that loss. You can't do anything. And it is awful. And I'm speaking of someone who's had that experience. And I remember my partner just being like, I literally don't know how to help you. And I was like, I literally understand that, you know. It's heavy. It's really heavy.
Yeah. And I think they wrote this section. It's just like an amazing part of the movie that,
yes.
Yeah, it just hits you like so hard. And I think at one point I wrote down exactly what he said. Tom, so Chris Messina's character, says, you watch these babies grow and then fade, and you don't know if you're supposed to name them or bury them.
Yes.
And like right now, even just reading that back, I'm getting like shivers, because it's like, so yeah, it's I don't know if there's much more I could say. It's just very on point.
It's very on point. And I will say also that if you take that line and you understand that is coming from a space of loss and grief, and you think about right before that, they were having this beautiful moment in a restaurant with the pancakes and the maple syrup, talking about all the love and patience that you need. And that, I love that part too, with these two characters, because they're reflecting on the challenges of parenting, which were very, very relatable. Like, someone wakes up and they're puking, and then you still have to get up, and it's like, and like they puked on the other kid's bed, and like all of this nonsense. And it's like very real. I was sitting there going, you know, like I can feel this in my core. But what he also talks about is, you know, when he's using the syrup to kind of show what it is, the love that you need, he says you have to use all of it. You have to use all of the love. And if you think about that character and Munch and all of the love that they pour into their family, the grief is just as big in the loss. And the dichotomy, I'm getting choked up, but the dichotomy of those two and the way that they represented that within these few scenes with this one family blew me away, because we don't have them on screen for very long.
Mm-hmm.
But they had so much power in the scenes that they had, that like, like you've shown me the entire arc of being a parent. Here it is. Everything. Thank you so much. There it is. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got them, you're introduced to them, and they're like watching
goofy and hilarious, right? Yeah.
The Sound of Music,
which they stop.
Right, which they stop before the Nazis and the Nazis and what is it? What's the line? It's such a good line.
Juicy Couture. That they were too young for Nazis and Juicy Couture.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, so good. There was one question that I wanted to ask you about the scene. I'm jumping back into the bar, maybe strip club, where they have like a amateur night, whatever. What did you think about the choice to have the two men talk about pregnancy loss? I guess I'll say I was struck by that, and I was curious about your opinion.
Yeah, it didn't stand out to me because they were men. It stood out to me because they're clearly old friends, and one of them is really hurting, and I don't know that he has anyone else to talk to about it. Was the sense I got. And so that whole scene kind of makes my heart hurt because he's watching her. Tom is watching Munch on the stage, and he knows why she's up there. Like, he understands the process that led her to make that decision to go up there. And it's like she's processing her grief that way, and he needs to process his grief a different way. And I think we've already, at that point, with the mere minutes that he's been on screen already, we know how articulate this character is, and we know how much he feels. And I took it as somebody who's, possibly an empathic extrovert, and maybe I'm projecting because that's me, but like, like who just needs someone to hold his hand spiritually, right, and emotionally in that moment. But now that you're asking it in the context of their roles, kind of in their marriage, in their not marriages, in their relationships, like, it is pretty significant. But it didn't even track because I was just seeing somebody who was just hurting. And also, just a shout out to Chris Messina. I have long loved this actor, and he carried his scenes. Like, you forget that he's only on the screen for a couple minutes. I thought he had so much power.
Yeah.
But what did you think about it?
I thought it was a bold and good choice, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I think you named that pregnancy loss is, I think you said it's very it's more common than we know, and it's highly stigmatized.
Yes.
And so I think to have the two men in this situation talking about it, because I think also to throw in the mix, like men being taught to like not have feelings.
Yeah.
I think that's also in the mix as well. And I think, I think I really liked it, actually.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just struck by the fact that I wasn't tracking that. And I love that you were. And I love, like, yeah, you're right. That was a very smart and significant thing to have happen in the story. 100%. Yeah.
So I'm just going to do a hard zoom out from this section, because I have another question for you.
I'm ready.
So they're going through they're meeting different people, and they're going to different locations to shop, basically to be like, where are we going to like settle? Where are we going to call home?
Mm-hmm.
And at one point in this section of the film, they say, we might be moving to Montreal. And it's like this beautiful, like, yay. And then they get the call from the brother, from Bert's brother, and they end up going to Miami. I think it felt like a little unresolved as to why, like almost like there wasn't a discussion of, no, you know what, we're not going to move to Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I was curious, like, what your thoughts on, like, I felt like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah. So when they tell them in the car that they're probably going to do it, when Munch is like doing her silly toast about it, she's like, who maybe might be moving here if they're not stupid, Right. So it's sort of like, my understanding of it was, this might happen, it might not, but it would be really cool if it did. And I think if we think about the arc of the characters, there's something about what Munch and Tom have created that resonates with them, but it wasn't theirs. It wasn't Verona and Bert's. It was Tom and Munch's. And certainly if they had moved to Montreal, I think it would have been amazing. But I think it was more, this is an example of something that resonates for us. And you're right, it wasn't officially resolved, but it also wasn't resolved verbally with Lily or Lowell either. Because Lily was like, oh my God, please move here. And Lowell was, drinking himself in misery. Heck, he did a great job with that character.
Yeah, painfully great.
Oh my God, so good. So I guess, we're only given the parts of the story that are pertinent to the steps that were shown. But I took it as, they might do this, like a strong maybe, because of how the toast was, Munch was like, well, we'll see what happens,
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's fair. I think they also say like we might be moving here like almost on like a whim.
Right. Like they've been there like an hour,
Yeah, exactly. Like this is better than the last place. Let's move here.
Because the last place was so atrocious. We need to talk about that place.
100%.
Is there anything else about Montreal?
No.
Okay.
Oh wait, no, I'll get to it in our LOL moments later.
Excellent. Oh
wait, no, there was one more thing. Sorry.
Go for it.
I think something I noted was just I wrote. They meet this family, and the way I wrote it was like the illusion of perfection. Meeting this like perfect family, and maybe I would put it more as like the facade. That there's sort of like this. You were saying it differently, but it's like on the surface, it's like, look at this perfect, beautiful family. We want to be like them. And then it's like, and also there's deep grief here. And we're like, that's the realness, of this family as well. She says, this is the family I want.
Right. But she also, I never said perfect. I want to call that out. Like, it was like, it's like,
no.
There's something that resonates with Verona. But what she says is, this is the family I want, kids all over each other, da-da-da-da-da. Like, what she's already seen is the joyous chaos, and she wants that.
Right.
But you're right. There's a whole other level to it that we are given, which makes it even more real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Phoenix.
Wait, do you want to, see, this is so funny. We did it again. I was talking about, I don't even know where they were, but Ellen and the Seahorse family, and you were talking about Phoenix. So we both have really strong reactions to these families.
I think you said Lowell, so I thought I got confused.
Oh, and then I was thinking, because they went to, don't they go to Montreal like after Ellen? I think it's Phoenix, and then Ellen's family, and then Montreal, right? Because then they go to Miami.
Sure. I don't remember. I haven't read the itinerary stapled onto the inside of my
You haven't read it. I'm so sorry. So we can start with either one. Phoenix is
either
Phoenix
one.
Is Phoenix. And
no, let's talk about seahorses and continuum and strollers. Yeah.
Okay, so wait, I have a question for you. So are we going Phoenix, or are we doing the other family? Which one do you want to do first?
All right, let's go in order. Let's go. So they go to
Phoenix first.
Hold on. Who's in Phoenix? Who's on first?
Lily and Lowell are in Phoenix.
Okay, yeah, let's go to Phoenix first. Because this one is just more, I think there's less depth here.
Yes, fair. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's cringy, it's funny, it's painful. Yeah.
I mean, I love Allison Janney. I have loved her for a very long time. And I remember, I don't think I was tracking that it was her in this movie, like when I saw it, and then West Wing and all of that. And then I see this character and I'm like, I hate you. Like, you're awful. Good job. Yeah. Bravo.
It's like you just want her to stop talking.
Yes.
Oh, God.
I think Bert manifests most people watching the movie, where he's just getting more and more physically uncomfortable with her.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, let me see if there's any specific notes I had for that. Just, oh my God, Allison Janney is what I wrote.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and just their parenting is really uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, it's almost like they hate their children.
Yeah. Like it's like that role of parenting that you see, like resentful, right? Like that, you know, we did everything we were supposed to, we're not feeling what we thought we would feel, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, their whole vibe just, or at least the Lowell side of the vibe is very like wet blanket.
Yeah.
And then it's
an itchy wet blanket.
I love when you modify my metaphors. It's wet, but there's also like
it's also bad.
There's like, what's that stuff called? Fiber, whatever fiber. Yeah. And like, there's also this desperation sound to Lily as well.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. We can get back into the LOL moments later, but this whole speech, this whole like rambling thing about the reverse flood, just he's just like, there's no water left anyway. And then he just goes off on this long thing and just the subtext of all of them sitting there and like their facial expressions as they like wait for him to finish this I actually was laughing pretty hard. It was very painful.
Well, and then doesn't Lily go, are you finished?
Yeah. You done? Oh God.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, and like the whole thing about the breasts, right? Like how Bert's really worried about Verona losing her breast size after meeting Lily.
Yeah. Oh God.
Because yeah, from there they go to Tucson and they see the sister. That's I'm remembering it now. Okay.
Yeah.
Was there more about?
No.
Okay.
I think Phoenix sets the stage.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, all right, the journey begins. You're about to meet a bunch of different types of people.
Buckle up.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Buckle up. I thought that the scenes with her sister were really the scene where they get into that bathtub together, like in the store.
I know.
I thought that was a really nice example of this sort of interplay between lighthearted and heaviness at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like her wanting Verona. Her name's Grace, right? Grace wanting Verona to talk about their parents, and then being like, "I'm gonna wash your hair," like just all of that, like at the same time. This like very intimate feeling, but also like they're in the middle of a store or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked about this briefly after we watched the movie, but just like, there's never a doubt in my mind when I'm watching these characters, specifically Verona and Grace, and then Verona and Bert, and even with Tom and Munch to a point too. But like, it's like these are real. This is a real relationship. I'm watching. Like this isn't. They're not acting. This is real. You know, because it just felt so genuinely intimate. And that scene, the bathroom scene, always makes me cry because there's so much there. There's so much in that tub with them. You know, so many feelings, and you're just watching these masters do this. I'm entranced every time. I'm like, I understand that this is pretend, but I am so blown away by your storytelling with these words and your acting, you know?
Yeah. I think that's something we have to talk about, just how natural they like that was something I wanted to ask you, because we did mention like, it's like watching a real couple.
Mm-hmm.
But what did they do? Like, what did John Krasinski and Maya Rudolph and obviously the writers and like, how did they pull off such a genuine feeling? Like, because I 100% agree with you. I was watching them and I was like, oh, like, I feel like I know them and I feel like they are together for real.
Yeah. Like one of the examples, before I try to remotely even begin to answer that question, one of the parts that kind of always makes my throat kind of clog up in a sweet way is after Phoenix. And Verona's kind of freaking out and she's like, oh, where is it? No one's in love like us. and just talking about like, you know, not seeing themselves reflected around, not seeing the love that they have reflected around them, and being scared by that, you know, being like, are we going to make it? Are we real? You know, all of these things. And so to answer your question, I remember seeing a lot of behind the scenes stuff for this a few years ago, mainly around where they filmed things. Like they didn't go to location. They didn't go to Montreal for Montreal. They, you know, all these things about where they actually filmed it, and it looked like other places, which was wild. But I didn't want to know too much about the development of the characters, because I like the mystery and the magic of it for me. But what I've seen other actors talk about is that a lot of times when they have a very powerful relationship presented like that, they just do a lot of backstory, and they do a lot of character building, like together with the writers, and also maybe with the actor that they're sharing that, you know, the relationship on screen with. And I wonder if that was something that they did. The writing in this film is so strong that if I had just read the words, like if I was reading this on paper, I think it still would have had a lot of power. But then you add these two actors who are just flipping masterful at this. Like, it was just like, I mean, I'm assuming that they did work together to kind of talk about what they wanted, how they wanted to represent these characters. They, you know, that's what I wonder. But I've seen other actors talk about doing like background info to kind of really flesh out the characters, and then that helps them be more real.
Solid answer. Things I had not thought about. Yeah, I think one thing you're naming is actually the tip of the iceberg effect of like, we're just seeing the film,
right? We're
not seeing all of the things they've done to prepare, or all the conversations, or all of the pre-production, or you know, the rehearsal, or whatever they end up doing, or table reads. I don't know, because I actually wasn't thinking about that. I was more focused on like, what am I able to see, and how are they doing this so well? I think one thing I was struck by was Maya Rudolph's ability to say so much without saying anything verbally. Especially towards the beginning of the film, when, let's see, there's the scene where they're driving, and
Bert, and he takes the call.
He takes the call, and he's like, Bert Farland, and he's like, totally. And you can just see, you feel it. You feel her annoyance and her frustration. And then, you know, she gets out of the car, and then there's this very sweet moment where their dialogue about her being like, you have to really be like, do you really have to sound like Casey Kasem, like a, you know, like a radio announcer? And there was something about the way that her not saying anything, and him like turning it around, and like that, him trying to like, you know, him being silly, and her refusing at first with her face, but then also being like, she's like, doesn't want to be amused by him, but she is.
And then she ends with like, he's cute with her, and then she kind of softens a little bit, and then she's like, okay, go away now. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, that is it. That is intimacy. That is a real relationship. I have had those moments. Like, I understand this completely.
Yeah. Actually, here's a somewhat tangential question, but how do you feel? I'll never know the answer to this, but how do you feel about the portrayal of a pregnant woman?
Oh, wow. I thought it was pretty real. There were a lot of components through the film that were very relatable. And I don't know that this is necessarily pregnancy related, but also or let me backtrack. This character, pregnant, Verona doesn't smile a lot until the end of the movie. And I just wonder how much that has to do with her making peace with the fact that she's becoming a parent with her parents not there, and everything that she needed to kind of figure out for herself. But I felt like you're watching somebody who's dealing with a lot of things in her head, while a lot of things are happening with her body as well. And one scene that stands out, which can be a good segue to the family, the Continuum family, is when they're trying to get on the plane, and all of the people, all the flight workers, the workers there, who are all presenting as women, female characters, you know, are all going to judge her based on her size to tell her that she's too far along to fly. And that it was so painful. I didn't have that experience specifically. I know people who have. I had other experiences where I was, you know, treated badly because of my size or my pregnancy at the, you know, like whatever. And my pregnancy size, I'm trying to say. And like, it's a lot. It's a heavy experience. And I felt like I was watching somebody who was very aware of how heavy things were. And I don't just mean physically.
Yeah. I thought it was portrayed. I thought she did an amazing job. I think that was interesting to note. She doesn't smile that much.
Yeah.
Because I do think I was thinking towards the end of the film about the character's arc. Mm-hmm. And maybe we'll save that for the ending. But you do see her smile in this scene where she starts talking about her parents and the orange tree. But let's hold on to that for later.
Let's hold on to that. So let's talk about Continuum. And I also want to make sure that we have space for LOLs and favorite characters before we get to the ending.
Yeah, let's do it.
So before we even jump into this cringy, privileged grossness of this family, did you have a moment where you were like, you know, Bert's talking about his connection with Ellen and how her mom was friends with his dad, but we're not really like, because Verona's trying to understand, is she a cousin? Did you pick up on that and what that maybe implied?
No.
My take on it after watching this a bazillion times, but then this most recent one was that what if they're like half siblings and nobody flipping knows because they were friends, the parents were friends, you know, like it was just the way that he kind of was like trying to recall it. He's like, actually, I don't really know. She's like a friend.
I need to read. I'm going to read the lines from this. I think this is accurate. This is from like the script.
Okay.
And wait, which side is she on? She's a first cousin, right? She's not technically my cousin, actually. Her mom was an old friend of my dad's. I have no idea how. Anyway, they started calling us cousins when we were kids.
Yes.
Bert, he says, she always used to make me take pictures of her. And I think Verona says, excuse me? Yeah. And then they get cut off because they go looking for her. And then
right. Like they told us to start calling each other cousins. And I'm like, why? Because are you half siblings? Like I just wondered about that. Like it was just like this little throwaway little thing. And then that thing about the pictures, I was like, I'm skeeved out and I don't even know who this person is yet.
Yeah, I didn't even. Well, it's interesting because it's one of those things they do where it's like you really got to pay attention. Like, and not to say I wasn't paying attention, but like sometimes when you see these far off shots in a movie and it's not a close up, it's like a very wide shot. Usually, well, I'll say for myself, my brain checks out a little because it's like, okay, I'm gonna wait till they punch in on them because that's when they're gonna start talking about substantive things. And absolutely not in this case. Like this is all happening, I think, in the wide shot, and it's like this whole reveal about them is really fucking weird. Yeah. So that's your introduction to.
That's
Ellen
your introduction
Fisher
to this character.
Heron.
Oh my god. So take us in, Alon. What do you want to talk about with this family?
Oh man. Well, one thing I want to say, which I think I said to you before, was that the more life I live and the more people I meet, the more believable these weirdos become.
You know what? I don't know if you said that to me, but I completely agree with you.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking, every once in a while I'll watch a movie and I'll think, I'll like be dismissive. I'll be like, this character is such a caricature and it'll feel like overdone. And yet now that I'm a little bit older, I see someone like this Ellen Fisher Heron character, also a great name. And I'm like, oh yeah, this doesn't seem that far from like people I've met in my life who I don't want to associate with. So honestly, we're introduced to her and she's, I think, breastfeeding both children.
Both children.
time, and one
Both
of them,
yes,
is
at least 5.
Is like standing up.
Well, he's sitting on the desk. He's sitting on the desk, and she's standing up, and then like the 5-year-old's like sitting on the desk and nursing, and then the baby, she's holding the baby on the other boob.
Yeah. I mean, that's your intro, and then she's got this whole, I'm just gonna say, like, Berkeley, California vibe. I feel like having lived there long enough, I can say that.
Yeah, I can't say it. I don't, but you can.
It's almost like this put on. Oh, what's the word? It's like a put on enlightenment that only goes like an inch deep. And you can see the cracks. But it's very like, this is how I talk. And it's so painful to be, yeah.
So painful.
So that's where I'll start. I mean, I think there's a lot to
They just took they concentrated white privilege and just, let it sit, and it does not bode well for anyone.
Yeah. And I think you go through these, you throughout your time in that section of the film, it's like a ramping up.
Yeah.
Like you start with like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And then you're like, oh, I don't agree with it. Like you're like, okay, she's kind of weird. And then they go and
they go on full on racist at dinner, and you're like, wait a minute.
Right, exactly. Like that's when like Bert just like, essentially that's when you see him in the one moment where he's not like just the like, or one of the few moments where he's not just like the really nice sheepdog. Like he actually is like, you are all horrible people.
Well, that's where I love his name again, because he's bright. Like he's very bright in his feelings. And at that point, his feelings are very loud because he's so upset.
Right.
And I love him, but it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah. It's yeah.
I tried really. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I feel like I've been at that dinner.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And like I remember sitting there with you, and I was trying my damnedest the whole time not to give you any. I didn't want to like shape your experience with the movie, but I was also sitting there for that, being like, should I have said something? Like, I don't. This is so no. He needs to experience it organically. And you were like, oh my God.
Just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, the catharsis for that scene is, first of all, the song Golden Brown. I love that song. And the song is in the background, kind of slowly ramping up and getting louder and louder as the scene escalates. And when Bert brings in the stroller,
yep.
Just like the kid jumps in, and then his parting line, like, you will never know greater pleasure until you've discovered, like, what was it? Oh shoot. You won't know pleasure like this again until you discover oral pleasure, and then like jumps out the door.
Yeah.
Oh my
also,
God.
Why is his name Wolfie?
I think it was short for Wolfgang.
Oh.
I think. Let me see if I can find that while we're talking. But I think that's what it was.
I reject your aggression.
I reject your aggression. What does he say? I reject your complete bullshit. Like.
Yeah, I reject your unbelievable bullshit.
Unbelievable bullshit. Oh, so
yeah,
good.
it's so cringy. Okay, we have to talk about the soundtrack.
Yes.
You, I feel like, are the grand poobah of soundtrack. So please,
I'm flattered.
Take us in.
Yeah. So the main artist on this soundtrack, the prominent name and
either one works.
The significant guru of sound, of music, was this musician named Alexei Murdoch, and he does most of the songs that you hear, and also most of the instrumental stuff that you hear through the entire film, with the exception of specific scenes like the one I just said, Golden Brown. That's not him. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I wrote for sort of general vibe of film, and also just the way that it was filmed and the way that the sound is used and music is used, it's very quiet for the most part. It's very unfurling. Like there's very, like you're brought into these scenes and things kind of unfurl. And a lot of the songs that he plays on the soundtrack have these incredibly soft, beautiful intro components of guitar strings or something else. And it's just very like, it just kind of pulls you in. And I felt, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it, it really enhanced the intimacy of these relationships and these moments between people, in ways that I just felt like it just felt like not so much cozy, but like there was this warmth. It just brought this warmth to and fullness and sincerity to the characters and the story. It just felt like a very intimate soundtrack for a very intimately presented story. What do you think?
I like the word cozy, actually, I would say.
Yeah, you feel that works? Cool.
I feel it. I thought it was interesting to have a single artist. It looks like, looking at the soundtrack, that all but 3 songs are Alexi Murdoch.
Yeah.
It was interesting to have most of the film be the same type of sound because it made it very noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I also didn't detract from the experience for me. It really did, like you were saying, it added to it. Like it made it more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I think if you've ever watched probably everyone has watched something on mute at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the power of music is highly underrated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every film uses it in different ways. I think the interesting part in this film was that I simultaneously was very aware of the music in certain scenes,
mm-hmm.
and it didn't take away from the experience,
mm-hmm.
despite how aware I was. Where there are other films where I feel like I'm like, oh, the music's too loud. Like I'm distracted by it.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the case here, even
mm-hmm.
though, especially with lyrics,
mm-hmm.
like a lot of films, it's usually instrumental.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the, or I don't know how many of these songs, but a lot of these songs have lyrics. And even then it wasn't distracting to me. Yeah. I really loved it.
Yeah. I'm going to jump very briefly to ending. I don't want to go there yet, because I know I want to do fave characters and LOLs with you, but to your point, to what you just said, one of the ways that I think that is done beautifully in this film, specifically around the music, is at the end, and I won't get into what's happening, but the line, right, is in the song is, "Will you wait for me?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting shivers just thinking about it, and we'll come back to it. But like that song at the end was perfection.
Yeah, I wrote down to ask you about that, so we'll get to that.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah. One thing I would say about soundtrack is I also think the fact that it was the same artist for most songs also made it more stark when it wasn't Alexi Murdoch.
Yeah.
So when they go to Montreal, it's George Harrison.
Yep.
And I noticed it very much because it was like energy. Like we're switching we're switching the mode, like new chapter, and actually I really liked that. I thought that was,
Ilan, that's actually, I'm just realizing that it's in a lot of ways the soundtrack for the film, like the baseline soundtrack is Verona and Bert's soundtrack. And the times when they were most dissociated from their path was when there were other songs. And then when things were more true for them in their intimate spaces, that's the music we heard was his. Damn. I'm just realizing that now. Yeah.
It's like the soundtrack of their relationship.
Yeah. And that's what it felt like. It felt like this intimate music that you were listening to that was giving us like, it's like the sounds of their hearts together. Like, so good.
Yeah.
So good. Whew, so many feels about this movie.
For real.
Is there anything about the Continuum family anything else you want to say, or anything else about music before we switch to characters?
Well, the thing about the Continuum family, the thing I will say about them is I think what interested me, I think that the one reason that it was well done was because it was based on, or loosely based on, real things.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't so far-fetched. I think, well, I guess the other thing I'll mention is, when you become a parent, especially with the age of the internet, like, how to put this? Everyone has an opinion.
People have opinions? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's plenty of just like in anything in life, honestly, but like if you go looking in the wrong places, you will find people who just like have the opposite opinion of you, not disagree with you slightly, but like have they're like literally like it's not that far-fetched for someone to be like, you know, I'm not going to put my child in a stroller because why would I want to push my child away? And who knows, maybe someone listening to this is going to be like, you bastard.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Like to each their own, you know, like if you don't want to do strollers, you don't have to, but that's what is so gross for me about this family is that they can't even fathom that anything else would be okay.
Right.
Or that they're wrong.
And that's a really good point. I think it's not even about the thing itself.
No.
It's about the mindset of like our way is the way.
Well, like the way that when they're like, oh, we're a continuum family. And then when they didn't understand, they're like, oh, continuum. It's like, hi, pretentious white people. Thank you for confirming that status. Like, that's not, she didn't not hear you. She just didn't know what you meant, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Big difference. Yeah, for sure. So in this beautiful cast of people, we kind of mentioned some of the names. You want to run us through just a few more names so people understand the extent of the beautifulness of the acting?
So, I don't know how to say her last name, so I will try, and someone can send me an email and correct me. But Carmen Ejogo plays Grace, Verona's sister. Catherine O'Hara and Jeff Daniels play Gloria and Jerry
Farlander.
Farlander, Bert's parents. We already talked about Allison Janney. Jim Gaffigan is Lowell. Samantha
Chris Messina,
as one of the kids. Maggie Gyllenhaal and Josh Hamilton as the continuing family. Chris Messina, Melanie Linsky. Who else? Oh, Paul Schneider.
Was the brother. Yeah.
Which we didn't talk too much about that section of the film, but a little bit. And I could go on and on and on, but that's sort of the major players here. I feel like we do need to talk a little bit about the parents just for like a hot second.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I was saving them for my LOLs.
I just realized that's what I'm going to do as well. So never mind. Yeah.
So do you have like a favorite character from this array, this beautiful ensemble? It's Wolfie, isn't it? You like Wolfie?
Yeah, Wolfie did do a great job. I mean, it's interesting. So I feel like I'm not going to allow myself to choose either of the two main characters because it's kind of like you spend the most time with them. It's almost like cheating. I actually felt like what you said about Chris Messina, like Tom's character, I feel like he really held in such a small amount of screen time. He did hold such a large space, and I felt like I wanted to go have a beer with him. I wanted to be friends with him. I wanted to like, he seemed like such a genuine soul. So I'm going to go with Tom.
That's awesome. He is definitely one of my top faves as well for everything that you said. And I don't want to have a beer with him. I just want to give him like a long hug, like, and then have a beer. But like, I just want to like,
some maple syrup and pancakes.
Some maple syrup flavored beer. But I will say for me, I love Grace. I love the sister and the dynamic between her and Bert and Verona and how like that. We didn't even talk about like how he's trying to talk up the guy she's dating and she's just like, what are you doing? And Verona's like, sorry, that was my bad, you know?
Yep.
But also Munch, I need to give a shout out to that character. I just remember this time thinking about her and thinking about my experience with pregnancy loss and people I know who've had pregnancy loss and just being like, I would have loved to have been on the other end of a text for that person, for that character, you know, just holding space for her, because I felt like she showed heartbreak and also love and very real parenting vibe that I found very relatable. And watching her and Tom's relaying, just sort of reflecting on, you know, clearly there was a day recently where there was a lot of puke early in the morning, and just watching the way that they created that dynamic together, I was just like, again, mere minutes on screen. And I feel so much of your history in that space, you know? So good.
Yeah. So I need to ask you, who is your character that you love to hate the most?
Elon, that's such a good question.
I think for this film, it's like, you know, it's pretty apropos.
My favorite. Oh goodness gracious. I think the Continuum people are too obvious because I just can't stand them at all. Bert's parents.
Yeah.
And I have two specific LOLs that I will wait for, but they were. I was so mad for Bert and Verona.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, so we'll hold on to that for
Wait,
LOLs.
What about you? Who are yours?
I think I have to think about why. We'll talk out why, but for some reason, yeah, I think some of the more obvious people I can't choose because it's just kind of like, yeah, like the continuum. It's almost like Ellen, and I'm also remembering that her name is Ellen. So,
I know.
She gets a huge credit in my mind for really portraying that character, but actually, the Jim Gaffigan's character, he's almost more painful because of his like deep, itchy, wet blanketness.
I just got like shivers again, like, oh.
Yeah, like I think, you know, it's funny. I'm gonna reference quickly, like working with teenagers. That I don't do that anymore, but when I did, I would often find myself saying like, I will take defiance and like energy over apathy. And I think, granted, I always know that the underlying apathy is something, and there's always more, you know, if you peel the onion. I think it's so painful. I mean,
he's ragingly depressed.
Yes,
like
100%.
And it's so uncomfortable to witness because he's just not dealing with anything. But yes, you're right. If I had to be in a space with somebody of the characters that I really didn't like in this movie, I would be like, I will pay someone to sit in the room for me because I can't deal with that energy right now.
Right, exactly. And now I'll make this my personal therapy session for 5 seconds. I think I'm realizing now I was depressed for a long time. And that's like one thing that I find hard to tolerate are people like this like Jim Gaffigan's character. I'm just like, oh, I can't.
Yeah. No, that's real. That's real. Absolutely.
But should we go over to LOL moments?
Let's switch over to LOLs. Yeah.
We're getting there anyway. But yeah, so his speech about the reverse flood, just like, it made me laugh really hard. But
he's so funny. That actor is so funny. And I want to see the outtakes for that, right? Like, because he delivered it so, you're like, what the hell is going on? Sorry, I cut you off, but it was so funny.
I think it's, you know what it is? It's I would say, I don't love the show Family Guy, but one thing I noticed that Family Guy does is they take a joke so far that you end up laughing. And that's what this speech was, where he's like so slowly talking about like the large mammals than the regular size mammals, reptiles, birds, dead people.
Yeah.
You're just like, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think. I don't have any from that grouping. Can I go to the parents for a second?
No, let's just jump around. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Great. Okay. So two that stand out for me with the parents is, I don't know if you caught it, but when the mom, Catherine O'Hara, is starting to regale, nobody wants her to, but she's regaling the birth story with the firemen.
Oh my God.
And they were all over me. And you're watching, if you look at her husband and her son, they both take off their glasses at the same time and rub their eyes the same way. Because they're like, we just cannot deal with this story.
and she's like, you have to picture it. And he's like, no, we don't.
No, we don't.
Yeah,
they were like, very capable.
Oh God.
Yes, very capable,
what
strong
did one of them
men.
ask? Did they have their hoses out or something?
Yeah. Did they have their hoses out, Gloria? Jeff Daniels, like, delivery on point.
I thought, yeah, the parent scene actually, like, where the scenes, plural, like, they are clearly very seasoned actors. And the way, like, she hands him the sonogram, or Bert hands him the sonogram. He's like, oh, these are great. And he's like, you haven't even opened them yet.
I know. That was so good. Oh my goodness. Oh, they're so selfish. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, just these are fabulous. Yeah,
these are fabulous. Yeah, and I have right after that whole dinner fiasco, I have we could get someone else to be the grandparents, written down as an LOL.
Oh yeah, 100%.
What's another one of yours?
I mentioned it already, but when Bert's like, Bert Farland, like, yeah, just the perfect, like, painful, yeah. Oh wait, what was there was one. Who says the line about indigent?
It's his father.
He's like talking about this piece of art that they've like spent like thousands
of dollars,
like $15,000 or something on, and he's like, oh yes, the indigent,
indignant, yeah.
And then he ends up saying ingenious people. It's like so cringy,
so bad. Yeah. Can I go to my next one?
Please.
Oh my God, I'm crying from laughing. So post the judgy flight people and their thoughts on Verona's pregnancy sides, we immediately cut to them walking to a train because clearly they did not get on the plane. And what I love about that is, like, she's not saying a thing. She's clearly pissed off and just walking. And Bert is like, no, but this is how it's going to be great. And then as they're getting on the train, he's like, we might see buffalo. And every time I giggle because I'm like, he's trying so hard to spin this right now.
Right. Actually, that was like a simultaneous cringe, but like funny moment to me was when they're on the train and she's really upset. And she's like, I feel so fat, or I feel so ugly, or both. And he basically says the perfect thing at first.
Yeah.
Like, I will always love you.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, that's so great. And then he keeps talking.
And
then he
this
says
is one of my two
things. Yeah. And you're just like, please, like, it's like all the wrong things that one could say to a pregnant woman at any given time.
And she's screaming into her pillow.
Right.
Because she's like, just stop saying the words that are coming out of your mouth. But yeah, you can write that on your heart. It's like, yeah, in stone. I'm like, I don't want you to talk about that ever again.
And I think what makes that part so funny too is how genuine he's being.
Yeah.
Like he continues to be very authentic.
Yes.
In how, like, unwittingly he's being an idiot.
Yes.
You can write that in stone on your heart.
Another one for me is every time they're trying to get the baby's heart rate up and he just starts yelling at her or screaming.
Yep. What does he call her? I know we said we were going to try not to swear on this, but I think it's not possible.
I think we're past that point.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but I remember it was amazing.
I might have misheard, but I think he calls her a sucker. Which is two words I've not heard combined, actually. That's usually a different word.
That's true. That's true. Both are, you can do both. And he chose to do that one. So there you go.
The element of surprise is important.
Yes. I have to give my so there's the itinerary stapled that I love on the, did you review the itinerary? But my absolute top laugh out loud. And I mentioned this in the previous episode, and I think I can't remember if I actually haven't talked about it on here in this episode, is the opening to this film where he is going down on her. And he realizes that her discharge tastes different. And he gets really excited because he knows what it means. And she slaps him off the bed. I'm like, I remember watching this for the first time and being like, well, I am sold on this movie.
I'm in. Yeah,
I am exactly. In. You have got me. Yeah.
I also think the timing of that scene was so well done, where he stops and you see his head like
his head just come up.
But I mean, all you're seeing is a blanket, obviously. But like, you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So good. Speaking of bed scenes, when they go to the Continuum family and they're standing there, one thing that I thought was really funny was I'm sure this was intentional, but like the more questions they ask the couple, the worse it gets. And each time they try to pivot like to something else, it just gets worse and worse. And I thought it was a nice building. But the part that really made me laugh out loud, which was kind of almost like a throwaway, was, what's his name? Is it Roderick?
Yeah.
He's like, we've met.
Yes.
And he's like, Burning Man 97. And he says it with such a like, you're like, oh, I hate you. But then when Bert turns and kind of nods very subtly, that was great. I just thought that was such
I love that part. And Verona's like, what? And there's clearly like something happened. And she is never going to find out what it was. I love that. Yes. Yep. So good. My last one, just really fast, is that whole scene with that creepy kid in the hotel lobby.
Oh, wait. I'm going to say one, and we're going to come back to that because we need to dissect that just a little bit.
Okay.
One that, this is just like a throwaway line, but they're in the bar in Montreal and the two guys are kind of bonding and they're just getting excited about everything.
Oh, the trombone.
And he's like, the trombone, man. Yeah, the trombone. The bone.
Yes.
Just like,
and then like right after that, they're like, we need food. We need to go get some food because they're clearly drunk. Yeah,
exactly. The hotel scene. Oh my God. What the fuck?
What I hate those kinds of parents that try to show off their kids and like that. And then when it just completely shows you the depths of this child and her like having no idea, like it's like, oh my God, like I laughed, but I was also horrified.
Babies like to breathe and they're good at hiding it. I put a pillow over a baby. Like, what?
Yeah, but I will try again. It's like,
sneaky, but I will try. Yeah, that is.
Yeah, that was another one where I was like, don't look at Alon. Don't look at Alon. Don't give him any information.
I was having trouble hearing it the first time I watched it, and I actually was like, wait, a what? Oh my God. Also, the idea of pointing at a pregnant woman and just being like, what's that? And it's like, you're pointing at a person.
Yeah. Like it was another pretentious white person moment. I'm just like, you're gross. You're so gross. Yeah. Any others? Because I think we should talk about the ending.
No, I think there were many.
We covered a lot in this episode. My goodness. The bone. That needs to be part of the intro. So the ending scenes begin with them leaving Montreal to go support Bert's brother in Miami, who has been dealing with, I think for a week or so at that point, the fact that his wife left. And his brother absolutely reeling from that and trying to figure out what he's going to say to his daughter. And, Bert and Verona just coming to help out. And there's some very sweet scenes with them and their niece helping put her to bed. Bert watching Verona with the niece that I thought was really sweet. And then leading to Bert having an absolute freak out on the trampoline. And then to what you have now dubbed my new favorite term for it, the trampoline wedding.
Yeah. So I think, that sort of sets the stage for the ending. I think one thing to mention, because it's sort of it's planted earlier in the movie with the sister, is that Verona doesn't really want to talk about her parents.
Yes.
And I think, we've talked about grief. And I think the reason I say that is because then we flash forward, and this not in the movie, but in our conversation here, I'm flashing forward to, after the trampoline, she's sitting under an orange tree and you can sense there's something different after the trampoline wedding. You know, they've made their vows that like no one's going to leave. They're going to do the best that they can for this one baby, that's all they can really do. They can't solve everyone's problems. And I think one thing, so I alluded to this earlier, but it's like, you see that, oh, there's a shift for Verona, like in her character. I think, well, for both of them, but it's more, I think the focus is on her, and she's sitting under the tree and tells the story about her dad. You know, is it an orange tree?
I think it was an orange tree, if I remember. Yeah.
So she's sitting under an orange tree in Bert's brother's yard, but she's talking about her childhood, and her willingness to talk about her parents. And it's clearly, if you think about being in a couple, you know, you reach a point where you think you've heard all of each other's stories. And I think this is a moment where Bert hasn't heard this story.
I will say I've been with my husband for 16 years, and I really hope that never happens. I think we still have a lot of stories to share, and I like being able to say that after that long. But
well, please note that I said you think you've heard all of each other's stories.
Yes, good point. But yeah, you watch Bert just taking in this magic of this moment that she's sharing. Yeah.
I guess the other thing I would note is like this sense of, I don't know why, but I was like, Garden of Eden, like there's this sort of like blossoming. It's like we're shifting into new life with like, the baby, but also like their new life. And she's sitting in, you know, like a blooming garden in this moment.
And it's at sunrise. It's a new day. You know, they just had a really, really rocky night. And I find it very amusing that the contrast of, it was a very grounding moment for the two of them. And it was a very much like a settling into each other, and it's on a trampoline.
Oh, yeah, it's on a trampoline.
Which is just very funny to me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something in that space, in that wedding, that their little wedding, that really, like, I can only speculate what it did for her. I know it's clear that what it did for him, like they definitely clearly, it's almost like they were already walking towards each other, and then they just literally were face to face with who they are and what they need from each other in this next phase, and laid it out. And I love that.
Well said.
Thank you. And then they get to the house, they go to her home, and it's this, again, like this unfurling, and the music, again, that song I mentioned before, Wait for Me. And it's heartbreaking because she's standing there in this empty house. And I love how they film that, where you're seeing her from different views of the house. Like she doesn't move, but you're seeing her from different rooms. And then she walks through to the backyard, which is like the most heavenly backyard I've ever seen in my life. And you're watching Bert emotionally react to it, and her kind of sitting in her space with her feelings. And it just makes me cry every time. It's so beautiful because it's like, we don't know if this is going to work. And he's like, I think this is perfect. And she's like, I really fucking hope so. Like, they just don't know, but all they can bring is what they have with them. And they're going to try.
Yeah. I like what you said about the way they filmed it. I think that, if you think about their two different experiences, there's a shot of her, she walks in, and there's a shot of her from the living room.
Yes.
And the second time I watched it, I was thinking, oh man, like walking into your childhood home, like there's so much that can hit you. And I imagined, because there's nothing is said, but I imagined all of her memories sort of flooding through. And I also think there's this symbolism of, they walk through the front door and they're in the space, but then they also open, like Bert opens that door out onto the water. And that's looking forward, you know, into what's next.
Whew, I just got shivers. Yeah.
And it's also the sound. I was very cognizant of the sound of him opening that door, that it hadn't been opened in a long time. And you could like feel the cracking open of that door, because this house has been, you know, sort of waiting for them in some ways.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I'm also thinking now that I wasn't even tracking this before, but like Verona's parents had 2 daughters, and they're expecting a daughter, and sort of that generational, like she briefly mentions at one point early on in the film, he's like, I want our kid to have a Huck Finney upbringing, and she's like, yeah, that's what I had, and he's like, yeah, like he doesn't push, right? And then you see the base of what this was probably like in this house and this water and this ocean, like beautiful space, and just appreciating what their daughter's going to get to experience.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a sense of making peace with your past so that you can have a future. Mm-hmm. And that she's making peace with her parents being gone so that she can be a parent herself.
Yeah. Whew.
And away we go.
And away we go. I also love the name. I've always loved the name. Like, that's what parenting is. Away we go. We don't know where we're going. This was a heavier episode, like not in a bad way, but I can feel the emotional weight from this conversation, and I'm really grateful for it.
Definitely. Agreed. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good spot to end it.
Mm-hmm. And go listen to some Alexi Murdoch and
I know, seriously.
Take some deep breaths.
Yeah.
And enjoy where you are.
Epilogue. I'm listening to the soundtrack to Away We Go, and I realized we didn't talk about the ending song, Wait For Me, but we mentioned that we would talk about it. And I had a note to say to Ariel, what do you believe the significance of the song Wait For Me is at the end of the movie? Because I was a little bit at a loss. Who's waiting for who? They really do like dial up the lyrics here, so it definitely has some significance, because otherwise they could have gone instrumental or with a different song completely. Okay, hit me up with a audio reply, and I will include it in the epilogue to our podcast episode, rather than us trying to get back on a recording together. Like,
hey, we totally forgot to talk about that. We talked about so many other things that I think by the end we just had to like wrap it up. So for me, the take on that song at the end, especially just thinking about what she's been through, being at the house, and also just their process of the whole trip, is sort of like waiting for who we are to be revealed, and also waiting for there to be peace in our hearts, and also just moving forward with our plans. And when you listen to the full song, it just talks about somebody who's struggling, asking for the person that they love to wait for them. And I kind of feel like they were both doing that at different points, right? They're both stumbling at different points. And I think at that point, she's really struggling. And he's really just holding space for her. And also just the idea of coming home and being at home with the right person. And that was my take on that song at that point.